up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know that everyone ran out to get some caffeine, but if you could grab your seats, and we'll also clear the back room. We'd like to get started on this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to this particular conversation because I'm sitting with three people who have made a tremendous impact on not just their company, but the way their company shows up in communities. What we have is, starting on the far side, we have Balaji Ganapathy. Balaji is the Chief Social Responsibility Officer globally for Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS. Next to him is Randy Bumps. Randy's the Vice President of Global Affairs and Public Relations for RTX. And next to me is Madge Thomas, who's the President of the American Express Foundation and also Head of Corporate Sustainability at American Express. So I've known all three of them for many years, in some cases before they even had the current jobs that they have now. And I thought maybe we'd start there. We'd start with the journey of how you got to where you are in the company, because in some cases, they went from a nonprofit to a company. In some cases, they went from government to the company. In some cases, they've been at the company for many years. So if you just maybe talk about the individual journey and how you got to where you are, but also let's weave in kind of your company's journey, because I think when I started here over 11 years ago, your companies weren't doing what you're doing now, but you're doing so much more and having so much of a bigger impact. And so we'd like to learn a little bit about how the company has evolved as well under your leadership. So with that, Balaji, why don't we start with you and we'll work our way this way.
Oh, thanks, Mark, and it's great to be among a room of friendlies. I would say, the journey has not been a typical one. For me personally, I was an engineer, then an entrepreneur. I started as a workforce leader within TCS 20 years ago, and then worked my way through our innovation and research teams, then in the business side, and then leading the community efforts. So for the past 5 years, I've had the privilege of leading our global social impact efforts. And I mean, it's been a very rewarding journey, but also the learning curve has always been steep. So when I think about the journey of TCS, yeah, we founded with purpose, being part of the Tata Group of companies. But when I look at what does that mean in the context of today, as an organization, we are creating solutions for customers worldwide using knowledge and innovation, right? So how does that translate into the social impact context is the question I've always pondered and asked myself. And what we have put together over the last 5 years is a purpose ecosystem where we put, our customer is people and communities. We are here because we want to serve them. And we play at the intersection of where the needs are high, the resources are low, and we as an organization can make a difference. So everything that we have done to bring the company around that mission and our larger set of goals has been centered around that. So I've had the privilege of building a 200-member social impact team over the last 5 years. Yes, it sounds big, but so are the bold and audacious goals that we are setting out to achieve over the next 5 years. And within that team, people who are closest to communities help us understand what are the needs of the communities. We have program teams that are looking at how do you bring the innovation and knowledge from different sectors to come up with programs that can be long-lasting. If you look at our signature programs, they are at least 15, 20 years old in each of those cases. Then we look at how do you integrate employees into this. So it's not employee engagement and volunteerism per se, which has its space, but purposeful service. How do you make them part of this solution that you're building at scale? How do you bring in technology and know-how? How do you get your business units involved? How do you get your customers involved and your cross-sector partners involved? So I'll end by saying that we are in that journey. I spoke about the 200-member team, but what really makes it come to life is the 200,000 employees who are volunteering each year. What brings it to life is about 156 of our business units that are involved in our efforts, 650 of our 2,000 customers who are working with us on various projects worldwide, and most importantly, about 15,000 of leaders like you around the world. people of all kinds in this room who are helping come up with insights that can help us move the needle together.
And what a journey it's been. I mean, congratulations again on winning the Best Corporate Steward yesterday. And our independent panel of judges recognize the from to, I think, with TCS and all the progress you've made and the impact that you've had in these communities. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. Randy, not just one company, but there were 4 companies, and now they're kind of one company. So we'd love to hear about how that works too.
Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be back at Business Solves. It seems like this comes around more than once a year, and I'm glad to see so many people that we've worked with over many years to build our social impact strategy at RTX. My own personal journey is not all that exciting in the context of the company's journey. The first half of my career was spent largely in political work, and then I moved into global communications consultancies, and then that led me to corporate America, working inside the company, at the time, United Technologies. And so that was about 12 or 13 years ago. And that was a diversified industrial company made up of 4 separate business units, 2 related to commercial aerospace and 2 others entirely unrelated. One is Otis Elevators, the other was Carrier HVAC equipment. And then in 2020, the company that was United Technologies, where I was leading the social impact team, merged with Raytheon. Most of you know Raytheon to be a defense firm. And that was in April of 2020, so the most poorly timed merger probably in the history of the world. But it gave us great opportunity, really, to think about what our social impact strategy was going to be going forward. Each of these companies had almost a century's worth of legacy. Each of them had very mature social impact strategies. They had small CSR teams, not nearly 200 folks. But in any case, what that meant for us was that we were this massive startup, and we needed to reimagine what that portfolio looked like. And in order to do that, we stepped back, and we looked at this as maybe once-in-a-career type of opportunity. Decided how to reconcile or rationalize those 2 legacy portfolios, built all sorts of internal scorecards and all kinds of different ways of judging what influence or impact we could have through our nonprofit partnerships. We did a lot of listening to our senior leadership teams, and then we worked really hard to ensure that the result was something that would engage our employees, because more than anything else, we were coming together in a time when people were separated physically and needing to build something that was unique to this company, something that would differentiate RTX from the 2 legacy companies. And so at the end of the day, we really understood or felt as though employee engagement was going to be the key to our future success. So after about 10 or 12 months, we then announced a 10-year, $500 million commitment to corporate social responsibility that was really, the foundation rested in this new strategy. And I hope we get a chance, as we talk a little bit more about the strategy, where we landed and how we focus.
Yeah. And Madge?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think I'm the non-traditional version here, where I often describe myself as a recovering lawyer. So I started my career in Australia in private practice, but very quickly moved into pro bono, working with Indigenous communities. And I think what that taught me was not just interpreting rules and regulations, but finding the gray area and the nuance. And I think it's that problem-solving aspect that I've always loved, thinking about complex challenges and coming up with tangible, bite-sized and aligned solutions, and that really took me into government and into our State Department in Australia, and then I came to the US about 10 years ago and joined the nonprofit sector. So I worked with Global Citizen and then went into the UN with UNICEF, and there I got to weave together these amazing partnerships between nonprofits and businesses around how you could address wicked global problems through the power of business, whether it was their employees, their marketing and spend and capital, and their philanthropy. And I say those 3 things because it was really the 3 components that we were thinking about. And so 2020, also a key moment for me, was when I joined American Express, and I got the call during the pandemic when I think we, like many companies, were grappling with how we showed up in the world. A 175-year legacy company thinking about how it was going to respond to the unique challenges of our time. And again, coming back to what I love about this job, it was an opportunity for me to really peel back all the layers and to exactly what you said, really think about, what it was that made us uniquely able to make an impact in the spaces that we focus on, what our stakeholders thought about. And I also wear a second hat as our head of corporate sustainability, so I got to also usher in our ESG strategy at the time, and really marry that with what we were going to do on a philanthropic side. And through that, we identified 3 new areas of focus: backing equal futures, backing financial confidence, including all of our small business work, which I'm really excited to talk about, and backing low carbon communities, which really focuses on a lot of our employee engagement efforts. And all of that has sort of culminated. We just announced in our recent ESG report that we're making a commitment of investing $100 million over 5 years in small businesses. And that came through this idea of a strategy that really aligned with who we are, who we've always been as a company that backs small businesses around the country and around the world. And so I think that wouldn't have been possible without that strategic shift. And I think we've talked about names a little bit, but I think so much has changed in the world, including what we call the work that we do. It's moved from, CSR to ESG. Now we're somewhere in the middle and maybe not going back. But I think the core of what has changed substantially, and you've heard us all talk about it, is really that alignment with your business and its people.
So let's dig into that piece, right? When you talk about the alignment with what you're doing in your business and the strategy that leads you to what kind of programs that you deploy and support. So Randy, can you walk us through a little bit how RTX has done that and really taken a step back, like you said, and examined how you want to show up in communities and kind of where your superpowers are really being deployed?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I described coming into this new company with my origin starting on one side of that, right? One of those entities. And we had a strategy, of course, but it was pretty complicated. I'm not sure it was easy for anyone in the business to understand. It was a mix of investments. Some of them focused on STEM, some of them focused on sustainability, and then a bunch focused on whatever someone's priorities were in the business. And so we really doubled down, looking at this as an opportunity for change, and settled on 3 key focus areas. One was STEM education, one was military and veterans, or 50% of our business is defense, and then an area that we focused on, which were the local communities where we operated, where we had a physical presence, where our employees lived and worked. That one solved itself pretty quickly in the midst of the pandemic. We focused on food insecurity, and we've stayed largely in that space since, understanding that if folks are not food secure, it makes success in the other 2 areas almost impossible. Whether you're defending a nation or whether you're trying to succeed in a professional realm like STEM, if you can't feed your family and you're food insecure, you're likely to be unsuccessful in those other areas. I want to focus on STEM just for a second, though, because at the core of our business is innovation and engineering. We have 60,000 engineers across RTX. And so our STEM pipeline is critically important to the future success of the business. And one thing that my colleague, Christy Becerra, who's here in the audience and who's devoted her time at our company to addressing, is how we continue to build that STEM pipeline, but do it in a really intentional way. We look at underserved communities and underrepresented populations and think about what it is in those places that we have to do in order to ensure that that pipeline is sufficiently robust 10, 15, and 20 years from now. That's a difficult case to make to senior leaders in the company, right? They're looking for engineers to come into the workforce today. These look like long investments. But what we know is that we begin to increase interest among students for STEM in elementary and middle school. We know that by the time students get to high school, we've lost many of the female students who've decided against pursuing STEM. And then we know that even those students making the transition from college, we lose more out of that funnel once they move into post-secondary education. And so our strategy after the merger of these two companies became increasingly focused on where are our key geographies, where are the places where we need these STEM professionals 10, 15 years from now. How do we build programs in those communities that are directly targeted at underrepresented populations who are unlikely to enter STEM careers at any point, absent some intervention? And then how do we stay connected with those students all the way across their educational journey? That meant putting together partnerships with nonprofits that would work with each other, not just partnerships with, in our case, First Robotics or Boys and Girls Clubs or NAF, but imagining an ecosystem where those partnerships would work with each other to sustain a student's educational journey all the way through their schooling. And then internally, we've spent a lot of time marketing this strategy to our internal stakeholders. Our global government relations team has needed to help us on the ground, pull these programs off. Our HR team has needed to agree to pull these students into a talent pipeline much earlier than they consider themselves applicants for programs. So it's a constant refinement, really, of this strategy, but we've decided to become almost single-minded about the way that we do this work, and less, I was saying before, it's really about discipline. It's about having the discipline to stay the course, to really get into deep partnership with our nonprofit partners, and to do our best to close out the one-off expeditions that sometimes stakeholders in the company want us to pursue.
Yeah, and so Madge, on that note, strategy, I mean, one of the things that American Express has done so well is to support small businesses. How do you tie that back to tie it into the business with the philanthropy? And what does that look like in the boardroom or in the conference room as you're making these strategic decisions? How do you come to, how do you do the programming?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think that internal buy-in is so key to that, right? And it's much easier when it is something that is inherent to the company and has been for a long time. I think small business has been something that's in our DNA and has been for a long time. This is the 15th year of Small Business Saturday this year. So, it's something that we have been championing as a company, which means the entry point to the conversation in the boardroom when you're weaving out a new strategy around investing $100 million of your philanthropic dollars. And I have to remind my team about this the whole time. It's the company's money, effectively, right? So how are we really thinking about how we can use the company's money to advance communities? It's much easier when it is already aligned with what you do as a business, and then what you can address from a philanthropic side is how you can uniquely do that in a way with nonprofit partners that are deeply interwoven into the communities to drive community impact. And one of the ways that we've done that is really think about two things. One is how small businesses and small business owners are actually at the center of their communities. When a small business is vibrant and succeeds, the community around them does as well, and outcomes are better overall. The second is when a small business is in trouble or is hit by impacts like a natural disaster like COVID, the entire community around them suffers because they are the fabric that weaves it together. And I think those two things in tandem were why we launched this new strategy to help small businesses build sustainably and build resilience, grow in a sustainable way to be competitive in the future. And the last one is recovering stronger. And one of the stats that we talk about a lot, Mark, is how 1 in 4 small businesses never reopen their doors after a natural disaster. And when you think about the world we're in right now, and these businesses being hit over and over again, we've just seen it in the last month, right? 2 hurricanes back to back that have decimated businesses around just this country. You think about the ripple effects that has, and the community members that rely on the essential services of those small businesses, and the fact that those owners are individuals themselves, and those funds are actually often blended with their personal funding, and they're keeping their families afloat. And so I'm really proud of the program that we launched with the Chamber, which is really a flex fund in the wake of disasters to help small businesses recover. And we rolled it out for Maui after the wildfires last year. I had the great privilege of going with the Chamber to meet some of the small businesses that we had supported in the wake of the fires about a year later. And what we heard from all of them was, A, what a relief it was to get a cash grant in the wake of that, because this was not a time when they wanted to go into more debt and take on, more debt. And the second was how much they wanted the community around them to come back, how much they wanted visitors to come back, because that's what kept them afloat, both as small businesses and as individuals. So I'm really proud of the fact that we build both those things in line with our business.
Yeah, no, we really believe here at the Chamber Foundation that community's not recovering until there's a resumption of commerce and stop, right? And the programs that we were able to put together to help those small businesses be part of the community fabric again is really important, and we see it time and time again. Balaji, TCS's strategy and how you've kind of moved it forward, and what programs that you choose to invest in. Walk us through that a little bit.
Two things I want to start off with, everybody to understand. I didn't start with a 200-member team. I started as a single person 15 years ago. So it is a journey. The second is we have to learn how to say no. I think it's one thing you want to take away from this panel. It is the ability to say no, knowing that you cannot solve everything for everyone and be everything for every problem out there in the world. So I think bringing that sort of discipline by understanding the need, the gaps, and the strengths that you have, that's where you keep going back. So for us, 5 years ago, we were doing about 150 different things around the world. Is that okay? What do we have to show for it in terms of impact? There is a lot of reach, but what are those outcomes? What are those impacts that are long-lasting? There are very little to show for. So it was about, first of all, looking at the portfolio and saying, how do we look at prioritizing what are the strategic themes we should be looking at over the next 10-year period? What are the focus areas within that we should deeply immerse ourselves in? And the programs that can activate and bring that to life. So we cut everything down to look at only 4 or 5 things that we're going to do going forward for 80% of our time and resources. And the rest 20%, there is still room for things to happen, which could be episodic or need-based, right? So you cannot predict how many hurricanes are going to hit in a year, but you can set aside some funding as well as some resources against that. So then looking at the core areas, for us, core strengths, enabling livelihood through literacy, K-12 education, skilling for employment, digital entrepreneurship, and inclusion. These are core areas for us to double down on, while working on areas like healthcare and water and sanitation and access, because they're intersectional, right? So I can talk about all of those, but one thing I want to share with you, which has had a tremendous impact in a strategic manner, is we as a technology organization are supporting customers around the world. In fact, I don't know if you know, but TCS runs the largest core banking service in the world. We run the largest social protection schemes for governments in the world. We run the largest insurance, common insurance schemes in the world, right? Providing access to that as a B2B provider, right? Enabling other organizations to do that. But when we looked at, for example, take a country like India, where 1 billion people are still in rural communities, and about 300 million of them do not get the social protection benefits trickle down to them. So we said, how do we use that as the place where we can have the maximum impact, leveraging technology, innovation, and the power of partnerships? So we build a model where we put together a dual goal. How do you identify women and marginalized people in those communities who would be able to set up their own enterprises and create economic opportunities as a result of that? That's something that we have a sweet spot in. On the other hand, how can they be the bridge to solve the last mile gap for those very same services that the community is missing? And I'm glad to share that over the last 10 years, we have had great proof points. Over the last 5 years, we scaled up those pilots. And just this past year, we have doubled down on that program, and it is running in about 7,000 villages, serving about 1 million people in 300,000 households across India, right? So that model is potent and can be taken anywhere to the world.
That's a pretty big pilot,
Yeah.
right?
And it is aligned to your core strengths too.
Yeah.
It is success for the very same people we are trying to serve, but in a manner where even if we step back over a period of time, it's an economic inclusion model that is going to sustain, because services are always going to grow and digital is always going to provide the access, and the last mile gaps are, even if it gets better, going to persist. So that's the learning, both in terms of strategy and prioritization of programs and how you can grow impact by scaling down and scaling up.
And Madge, when you look to the future, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, like where do you see American Express and making these investments and acquiring these partnerships? Is it going to be what you're doing today, or is it going to be something brand new?
I think the benefit of a really good strategy is it should be pretty future-proof, right? If it is truly core to your business, obviously it will evolve if your business evolves, but there's some things like small business that I think will be a core part of our strategy go forward. And if I look to the future, right, I'm going to just talk about tomorrow, but I think you'll see more of what we're doing, and we have something exciting to share then that is building on what we are learning through these programs. I think that's the other thing, right? We can pilot so much, but it's also iterating and evolving the programs as we learn. We've done that with our Leadership Academy and scaled that up, but also scaled that down, to your point, to focus it from 73 different programs around the world to 3. And so I think it's really achieving that kind of scale of impact and ambition aligned with your strategy. And then I liked your point about the 80 to 20, having some flexibility and adaptability, that if the world goes haywire, as it has a little bit over the last couple of years, that you can also deploy the toolkit and the learnings of what you have and adapt it and apply it to different situations.
Yeah.
So that's what's coming for us.
And Randy, at RTX, I mean, how do you all look at the future?
No, I love this idea that the strategy should be stable. The idea that a strategy is broad enough so that it outlives any one of us in our roles in these companies. And I think that STEM for us is that stability. 5 years from now, the success to me looks like at scale, not 1 off, 2 off, 3 off, former students who've been in these STEM programs in our workforce, but it looks like bringing those students at scale into our company, allowing them to repay or pay that forward to the next generation of STEM innovators through their own mentorship, through their own community leadership, and to play a meaningful role in our business. And it'll be 2030 or 2031 when it's timely for us to make our next decade or 2 decades worth of commitment. And I want to be able to have hard data from the programs that we are running today, that we're working hard to measure, that demonstrates our impact on that STEM career pipeline, whether it's for our benefit or for the benefit of any other company with STEM careers.
And Balaji, you heard me say this earlier with the panel from the morning, but if there's one thing that you wanted the audience to remember about TCS, and it's kind of what you've learned over the years you've been there, what do you want them to walk back to their organizations and say, I learned this from TCS today?
Wow. No pressure. I think, yes, I'll end with that. But a quick thing is data has to be your best friend, right? And not just data that suits us in making the case, but real data that shows to those whom you are putting your programs and your pitch to, whether it is boards or CEOs or CXOs or your advisory committees, that's very, very key. So our long-term strategy when we are developed for each of our areas, we have said, okay, over the next 5 years, how can we enable livelihood through digital literacy for 100 million people? How can we create access to 21st century skills for 50 million students? How can we enable 10 million people to enter into jobs in the new economy? How can we enable those 1 million entrepreneurs who can serve 1 billion people potentially in the next 5 years? So those are tangible reach goals, but you need to have evidence and latency to say that some of it is going to succeed and we are not going to do any of this alone. This has to be done at scale with government, with the right governance from multilateral organizations, with the right kind of patient capital with other philanthropies, and the long-term needs need to be done at a grassroots level with community organizations. So if there is one thing I want to leave you all with, yesterday I said, lean in, don't tap out. I'm going to leave you with this phrase. I think today is the day of threes, right? So the three phases is good intentions, good actions, good outcomes. We all have good intentions. Have the perseverance to move it from good intentions to good actions. Make it measurable. And then have the resilience to stay the course till your good actions lead to good outcomes.
Yeah, Randy, how about your one thing?
Hard for me to improve on that. That's pretty compelling. I mentioned that the first part of my career was in government and politics, and there was a saying, never waste a good crisis. I've translated that for this role, and it's really never lose an opportunity to achieve the change that you're trying to make in your company. Every company in this room is, or each one of you represents a company, no matter the size, that has leadership changes, that has mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, changes in your business lines. Every single one of those opportunities is an opportunity for you to go to your leadership and present new thinking on how your strategy can evolve. And in some cases, you get that once in a career opportunity like we had at RTX.
Madge, you get the last word.
Sure. I'm going to choose 3 words, but 2 of them are connected. I'd say prevention over response. I think sometimes it's very easy for companies to be reactive. And I think, again, coming back to having a good offense is your best defense, you need to really think about what could happen and what you're trying to achieve, to your point, but come back to how do you prevent those things from happening in the first place? How do you build a pipeline of success before that? And then the last thing I'll say is it's partnership. So in the work that we do, we're not the ones administering and running the programs on the ground. So you really have to be thoughtful and choose nonprofit partners, and those are both internally and externally, and work with aligned companies as well. None of us are going to solve any of these issues alone. So I think partnerships are going to be key to achieving the outcomes and the scale that we're all looking for.
Well said.
Madge, Randy, Balaji, thank you.
Thank you.
Give them all a round of applause, please.
Yeah, thank you.